Welcome to Equine Assisted World. I'm your host, Rupert Isaacson, New York Times best-selling author of The Horse Boy, founder of New Trails Learning Systems and LongRideHome.com. You can find details of all our programs and shows on rupertisaacson.com. Here on Equine Assisted World, we look at the cutting edge and the best practices currently being developed and established in the equine assisted field. This can be psychological, this can be psych, this can be physical, this can be all of the conditions that human beings have that these lovely equines, these beautiful horses that we work with, help us with. Thank you for being part of the adventure, and we hope you enjoy today's show. Welcome back to Equine Assisted World. I've got Ellie Williams with me. I've known Ellie for a while. She runs a pretty rad gig out in Pennsylvania, on the Pennsylvania-Maryland borders. But she's actually a Brit who's a long-term resident in the USA, so you're going to hear a bit of a hybrid accent here. But she does very, very, very interesting work in trauma, in equine-assisted psychotherapy of various kinds, and in neurofeedback. And these are areas which aren't necessarily known so well within the equine-assisted world. And for that reason, I wanted Ellie to come on and educate us a little bit about them, particularly in the work with trauma, particularly in the work with attachment disorders and that sort of thing. There's a lot we can learn. It goes, as we all know, a lot further than just giving kids pony rides. But we've all been at that point where people think, well, you're just giving kids pony rides. So I'm going to turn it over to you, Ellie. Can you please tell us what you do? Who are you and what do you do and why do you do it?
Well, hopefully we've got a bit of a few minutes to answer that question. So Ellie Williams, Executive Director of Equiteam Support Services. I work in Dallastown, Pennsylvania, and also in Hunt Valley, Maryland. And I have been doing this work, started with the equine assisted work back in 2000, going on 18 years of just the journey of where the need is. We work a lot with children and youth in the foster care system, adopted clientele as well. Lots of trauma, lots of abuse and neglect. In my journey, I started with the Agala model in equine assisted work. And then I found you, which is amazing because I then work with our autistic clients within the horse boy model and method. And it's a great hybrid. I still have some great clients, and we had the wonderful Temple Brandon on our farm many years back and learned a lot from you and Ra in that area as well. And through my journey, I've been doing a lot with trauma and attachment issues. Children in the foster care system have gone through a lot, and they don't understand how to have healthy attachment. So I decided to go and become trained. Our local attachment therapist in the area just left. So I was like, well, better me, I'll go do it, and fell in love with the work. I connected with dyadic developmental psychotherapy. Dr. Daniel Hughes is the creator, and he actually lived about an hour, just over an hour from me. Was able to study under him for about 2.5 years, and currently on their board of directors as their treasurer. I think by fault, just because I was in the Northeast US, that I became treasurer, but amazing group of people and doing the work of, as you said, attachment and trauma, the developmental trauma stuff. And one of the other wonderful aspects of the work that we do, we provide neurofeedback services using the neurooptimal neurofeedback system. And I do that when I have an office session. I will hook a client up and have an office therapy session with a cat or a dog, because there's always animals around in the work that we do. And I call it my magic machine. It balances the brain and it helps clients open up and go to a deeper level when we're having therapy. So lots of things that we're doing in just our small organization in the Northeast Pennsylvania, Maryland area.
Okay, you're a Brit, you're a horsey Brit. We also connected, you and I, through the hunt world. What got you, a horsey Brit, over to Pennsylvania? Why does a horsey Brit fall in love with attachment disorders and trauma? What's the story?
Well, I think you just follow. I don't know. It's probably a long, winding road, really. We moved to the US because my dad's job brought us here. And, there were a lot of things that happened in my life that led me to work for Children's Services. I worked there for about 10 years, and there just wasn't great services. You know, there was the traditional therapies, and it was sort of before, I mean, there was some play therapy, and I'm not saying they're not great, they are. But I wanted something that I fell in love with, and my love of horses and my love of helping people was just, oh, it's just the perfect fit.
Trauma, though, and attachment disorders, it's a rather specialist road because, one's dealing with really intense and heightened emotional situations. It's not everybody's cup of tea. There can be conflict, there can be manipulation. One can feel, manipulated by clients. Even it's complex.
Yeah.
Anyone who works in the sort of psychotherapy field acknowledges that it's tricky. What was it about that made you think, yes, actually, this is my professional home?
I think when you work with horses, I always work with young horses. I love training young horses and figuring them out and doing a lot of, putting the time in and helping them get to know what they need to be, what they need to do in jumping and dressage and flat work. And it's the same with people. I find that I have this curiosity and I want to help them live in a world without anger and violence and no power struggles and need for control. And it's the parallel is just beautiful. I mean, horses as a herd animal, that's what we help them, when we interact with them, it's very similar than the kids that I work with as well, and families as well.
So I think a lot of us see that parallel between working particularly with young horses and also a lot of us who work with donated horses. We get the horses with all the stories that they have in their bodies and in their minds, and the rehab is very much part of this. I think a lot of people can relate. However, not everybody understands the terminology and the world of attachment. Talk us through it. What is an attachment disorder?
So basically, between the age of 1 and 3, as a human being, we need to have a healthy attachment or build a healthy attachment to our caregiver, whoever that might be. And most of the time it's mum and dad, or it's just mum, or it's just dad, or sometimes it's granny, whoever that caregiver is. And when you live in a chaotic, violent, drug and alcohol, lots of things that are unhealthy, you're learning, there's just unhealthy connections. You're not able to have a healthy attachment. So when you have an unhealthy attachment, it's now disorganized and you don't know, it's kind of like when you have the child say, look, mommy, I've made this for you. And they go, oh, yes, I'm so proud. That's amazing. And you have this just nurture and this pride. I have so many children that don't know what that is. They know the, hey, mommy, I did this for you. And it's the, get out of here. You're worthless. So they don't have that connection. They don't feel connected. And then they don't know how to connect. And that's where the unhealthy attachment and disorganized attachment comes in.
What are the usual negative outcomes of that? What do we see? Why do we need to be paying attention to this?
So as kids get older, they're going to have difficulty in their peer relations. They're going to struggle socially. They're going to try and control everything. They'll power struggle. Oh, they're just, they know how to power struggle. They know how to push buttons. They know how to make you angry. And because that's what they've learned. They've learned through whether it's a volatile, violent environment, that they are now, that works for them. They don't know what calm and nurture and loving is. They just know the chaos.
And why did they find that works for them? What when they start mirroring those behaviors, what do they get?
They get attention.
Okay.
They get attention that they never had. And they go, oh, that's kind of nice. I like that attention. Even though it's, you need to sit down or you're going to the principal's office. Right. It fills a void that they never experienced. And then our job is to then help them learn how to fill that void differently, which is really difficult.
And does it become, would you say, dopamine related? So then it becomes like a seek and find behavior, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, interesting. So if somebody has an attachment disorder, what are the steps to ameliorate?
The long journey, the really long journey. And I really enjoy working with kiddos as young as possible. You know, if I have teenagers that have had such a dysregulated life throughout their, until they're teenagers, the ingrained behavior it's solidified. It's really hard for them to sort of go back and relearn some healthier behaviors. But I love working with kids when they're 3, 4, 5 years old, because it's about helping them understand what they do now and relating it back to their developmental trauma, and being able to then help them educate them through psychoeducation of, wow, I see that you do this, or I've noticed that this happens when somebody da 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 da. Oh, I wonder if that's when, kind of like when you were little and mummy and daddy ignored you, and how that can connect. Yeah. And it's then being able to help them restructure themselves. And through the DDP, dyadic developmental psychotherapy, we have a model called PACE, which is being playful, accepting, curious, and empathic. And if you are paceful, and whether it's as a clinician myself, parent, a caregiver, school personnel, if you can implement those 4 things into a child's life or a client's life, it helps them understand. Because sometimes, so if one individual, say I have a client that's really angry, if I'm being silly and playful, sometimes they're then not angry. Sometimes doing a silly walk, because they don't want to go back to the car and their power starts struggling and they don't want the session to end. Doing a silly walk to go back to the car just works. It snaps them out of that power struggle. And I'm going to be accepting of where they are all the time. I'm going to accept they're in this need where I don't want to leave. I feel safe. I'm having a good time. And then I'm going to be curious because I want to know more about that. But I'm going to have empathy because they're in that place. Does that make sense?
It does. Do you ever find this can happen? I'm a great believer in humor.
Yeah.
And I also know that humor can sometimes, with someone who's power struggly, be taken as a way to have yet more power struggle. When you're humorous and playful, and then a kid or a client takes that and then reacts even more negatively, what do you do?
Adjust. You just think on your feet. You're like, well, okay, that didn't work. That sort of amplified. I might step away. I might create some space. The great thing about working with the animals, they sort of meet them where they are. So if I have a kid that's power struggling and they're trying to get the horse back into the stables, and the horse is wanting to eat the grass, and now the horse is the power struggle because they're trying to get the horse. So then I might be like, have they been talking to you? It's about like what we were doing just a minute ago. We were power struggling, and now look, you're power struggling with that one. So it just kind of lightening it up. And if you're smiling and you're happy, you can't be angry. So, being able to shift the focus is so important. So important.
When you've got these kids that are coming to you so young, who's bringing them?
Most of the time, foster parents, caregivers. Sometimes I'll have drivers. Sometimes I don't have the parental caregiver. I really do. I mean, I ask for it, if I can have it at all costs, because that way I can check in with them at the beginning of session. It can be in session. I know that's something that you always talked about, having them in session as much as possible. And if not, just being able to have that contact, what's going well, where are the struggles, that sort of thing.
Yeah. So, okay, so the foster system.
Yeah.
We know that equine assisted therapies are not cheap. Anything with a horse is not cheap. How they're affording to come to you?
So I have contract with our local agencies, our government agencies, which took a long time to not only get the contract, it took us a few years to get the contract, but it took us probably another 8 years to get paid to the point where we needed to get paid, if you see what I mean.
Yeah.
But also then having to do a lot of fundraising and grant writing and requests of, connecting with people in our community that would support us to cover the difference.
Yeah.
The other aspect, we do private pay. We have a sliding scale. We don't like to turn anyone away if we don't have to. So we try really hard to get them the funding they need.
And so you bootstrapped it originally. You looked around for support in your community. You created a nonprofit. You went about it that way. When you made the shift to becoming a funded provider from the state, there's a lot of people who will be listening to this who will be thinking, I'm at the start of my career. I don't quite know how one goes about that stuff. In a nutshell, what's the red tape process?
I think it's networking, finding people within your community, different organizations, whether it's Rotary, whether it's, young entrepreneur group, talk to as many people as possible. And I say so often, I don't know everything. And if I don't know something that I need to know, I'm going to find somebody that does.
Yeah.
And it's so important, that face-to-face and the handshake and the conversation and being to go, I was lucky because I actually worked in that system. So I had a lot of contacts already.
You were already a therapist.
So I wasn't a therapist at that point. I worked in the child welfare system as a worker. I was actually one of the managers in our local office. So I knew people that I needed to talk to. I already had that step ahead. But if you're going out there and you're going, I want to work within, whether it's the mental health or it's drug and alcohol or it's child welfare, go bang on the doors. Go set an appointment. You give them a call, work on in, because it's important. Like this is what I'd like to provide. How can I go about getting on your docket sort of thing?
Absolutely. It's funny. I'm a great believer that people say no 3 times usually. And then the 4th time they tend to say yes just to shut you and make you go back. And I'm always surprised that people fall at those fences. It's like, dude, they're going to say no at first. That's their job in a way, to see if you're serious about it. And did you find that you had to go back 2, 3, 4 times?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is asking them what their needs are. This is what I have. Does it fall within the need that you have? Our biggest thing is we didn't have the outcomes that they needed. Like they're like, well, we like the sound of what you're doing, but does it work? Is it, will it produce the outcomes that we want? So we worked for about 2.5 years to get those numbers and to get those statistics, to go back in and say, we're maintaining over an 85% success rate of clients completing treatment.
Now, how did you prove that without like a peer-reviewed study? Because people could say, well, that's just anecdotal. Why should we believe you?
So basically we just do, you're right. It's not like an in-depth study, but we use outcome measures that are valid through we have different ones. We use the youth outcome questionnaire and we use
youth outcome questionnaire.
Youth outcome questionnaire.
That's something people should be aware of.
Yeah. And it's a pre-test and a post-test. So it basically gives you a snapshot of how the client feels they're doing before treatment and after treatment. And then we have a child and adolescent functional assessment scale, known as a CAPAS. And that's an outcome measure that I complete, and I complete it every 3 months to be able to sort of see how the progress is coming along.
And are these things that people can effectively download off the internet?
The outcome questionnaire it's something that it's a small fee to be able to use that outcome method, the tool. With the CAPAS, it was a more in-depth process. I had to study it, pass a test, knowing that I know how to utilize the model. It's more in depth. They have an annual fee, which isn't huge, but it's a very good measure. Very good measure.
Who controls that? What's the governing body for that?
Off the top of my head, I can't remember, but they have a few different outcome measures that this one governing body has, and I can't remember. They have like the GIF and the CAFS and a couple of others as well.
But these are recognized by local health authorities.
Yeah.
This is good to know, because this is the sort of thing I didn't know when I was starting out. I was just a bloke in a field with my kid, wondering. I still don't know, So I'm always intrigued to know what are the, if you like, official steps that people can take and should take.
It's nice. I'm sorry, go ahead.
You go ahead.
It's nice because working in the child welfare system, often I will be subpoenaed for court. There's obviously different things that I have to be careful about, but when working with lawyers and judges, you have to have that specific information, and being able to have outcome measures can be very helpful, when you're up there to support the client that you're in court for.
Do you provide trainings, advice, mentorship for people that are wanting to start off in this? Because it's interesting. You're very clear about how to navigate this, and I'm very used to hearing people be actually much less clear and more woolly. So I think this is valuable information. Do you do that sort of service for people that want to get going in this profession?
Yes. It's one of those things. When I started, we again went to all the people that you could learn from. I do charge a fee, but it's something that I'm always willing to help somebody get further in this field, because we really need to be doing it. It's amazing work. So,
cool. All right. So people can contact you for this. Okay. So at the end, listeners, we're gonna obviously have contact for Ellie. So if you've got these questions and you want to engage her services to help her light the way through Fangorn Forest and Mirkwood and the mines of Moria, she will help you with the Balrogs. All right, I've got some questions about some of the methodologies you use, because they're quite intriguing to me. You use the Igala model, and that one I'm familiar with, and Lynn has been on this podcast, and we're all great fans of Lynn, both of the Igala and the Horses for Mental Health stuff she's doing now, and so on. I'd like to ask you, pick your brain a little bit about a couple of the other things, and I'm going to look at your website as I'm doing it so I get the names right, because these things one can often get the names wrong. So, our transformative DDP services is something that you orient people towards. What is a DDP service?
That's what I was talking about a little bit earlier with the dyadic developmental psychotherapy.
Right, dyadic.
Yes.
That's a word you don't hear every day. When I go to fill my car up with gas, the bloke doesn't say, "Oh, would you like some dyadic, or would you like 2 diesel?" Or, when I'm trying to, walking my dog, I'm not saying, "How's your dyadics today?" To my neighbor. So what's dyadic mean?
Well, it's more about the dyad, isn't it? The parent-child, the connection with another. So, in theory, it could be a dyad.
A dyad meaning a two-way relationship. Okay.
We prefer, in the work that we do, to have a parent-child or, have that dyad. If necessary, we need to have, I can be the other part of that dyad, if you see what I mean. Because it would be me and a client, or preferably the client and a caregiver.
And you are facilitating between
Correct.
the dyad.
Yeah.
The piggy in the middle. How does it work? Talk us through it.
But I think the biggest thing is when we first start with a client, I guess I'll start at the beginning. I really need to know more about the caregiver, whether it's a foster parent, whether it's a biological parent, adopted parent, whoever that might be, granny. I need to know, and they talk in DDP, they talk about meeting with them separately first and getting to know them and learning about their own attachment history and really learning and helping them, because if you're asking them to do something very different from their original parenting style, it's going to be a little bit tricky. So it's basically building that relationship between you and the caregiver first, and then bringing the child in to work within that diet that you were talking about.
Okay, so what would be the standard tools that you'd use, and how's the horse come in?
Well, the great thing is that, so as of right now, we have 3 miniature horses, 2 horses, and a pony. And I'll just give an example. I think it's great when you can give an example rather than just talking in generalities. I have a family I work with, young boy, and I have multiple siblings. So we have 3 miniature horses that are now been named the siblings, and they're sort of through discussion like, well, which one's this one? And well, that one's the one that stares off into the corner and kind of withdraws. So that's that kid. That's kid A. And the one that's up in everyone's business and trying to eat your clothes, well, that's child B. And the cat, that's child C, because he is in everybody's business. And he's also particularly a little, so we're using through metaphor and being able to connect with the animals through that way. And then we will, very much like the Agala model, we will throw out, whether it's, creating something or observing relationship or interactions. And then through discussion and processing, being able to take those experiences from the client, observing the horses and the interactions, and then connecting it to their own life.
So what happens when you get a kid or a client saying, don't be stupid, that's not my dad, that's a cat, why should, that's just a cat, this is stupid. Well, how do you navigate that?
I almost went like, so on the street, I was almost like, "Oop," and then I was like, well, I'm not in session, so I'll stop. It is hard. It is hard to sometimes see that cat. It is a cat. And it's hard to see, like, because they are very literal, aren't they?
Yeah.
It is. And so I have empathy for the fact they're like, screw this. I won't do that.
Right. And it could be a need to challenge, right? They need you to show that you care enough to explain why the cat.
Yeah. And if that's going to be a cat, that's fine. That's a cat. Okay. And then the conversation might then be connected with, it's hard to feel connected. So if you keep it as a cat, it's not as real, and it's not as it's connected as the person, if you see what I mean, that there's, has been labeled.
Yeah.
It keeps it separate. So would that make sense?
Do you find that sometimes you have to actually explain metaphor?
For the little ones, I do. I'm at the beginning, when we first start with the equine therapy, I'll explain the metaphor a little bit more, just because they don't understand metaphors really until a certain age.
Yeah, it's fairly complex.
Yeah. So we'll simplify it, and say the client working with the miniature horse, and mom says, "Oh, well, this is like Sally and you," and so now we're going to call that horse Sally for the rest of the, when we're with that client, unless the client says, "No, it's not Sally. I don't want to, don't want it to be called Sally." And then being able to put words to that. So, wow, what is it about this one that's like Sally? So even if they're a little resistant, you can still keep working with it.
Well, I presume you need people to at least have a certain degree of theory, what psychologists will call theory of mind and false belief. I have understanding that other people see things differently. I remember taking, 2 to 4 years slowly to educate Rowan, my son, in metaphor, but of course he's classically autistic. Now, of course, he, it's like he could Monty Python. So I created a complete monster, which is great.
That's wonderful. Yeah.
But the reason I ask, one does sometimes find that metaphor doesn't come necessarily naturally to everybody.
Right.
And I'm just intrigued at what are your tools for helping people to understand it? Do you have a kind of standard toolbox that you would use?
I think everyone's different. It's kind of like, when you have like horses, everyone's a bit different. I think for me, it's, you have to get a feel for the client, and you have to get a feel for their level of understanding, and I adjust in the moment as necessary. And if I need to explain it a bit deeper or make that connection, and that's a little bit different than the Agala model, because it's in the Agala model, it is about the metaphor and the client to maintain that metaphor. But like you say, sometimes whether it's autism or attachment, they don't understand it. They don't get it. So being able to put words to that and explain it a bit more is necessary.
What's your advice for someone who's starting out with this diet model, who maybe would, I mean, I'm thrashing this horse a little bit, but what if they run across a client who doesn't necessarily get the metaphor so easily, what would be your advice to somebody to help the client to understand? You're very experienced. I'm sure a lot of things come automatically to you, but imagine they didn't.
I think for me, it's meeting them where they are. And sometimes it's just, is it about me wanting them to understand it?
Okay.
You know, is it because, is it okay for them to just, if they've got all this pent up energy and they need to run around the arena 10 times, let's have running races, you know, let's change the focus and go somewhere. Maybe we have to go somewhere different. Maybe we have to get creative, you know? So I think I have to reflect a little internally there. If it's me that needs them to know, is it working? Is it just naturally happening? If not, then there is more education of like, hey, buddy, this is a struggle for you, isn't it? Gosh, it must be, you know, Mommy wasn't there for you when you were little. That must have been really difficult, you know? And now this horse here is over in the corner. And I wonder if there's a different way that we can see if we can get him over here. You know, like, so now I'm like encouraging and educating and connecting and helping him in a different way.
Right. I love your point about if they need to run around, then let them run around. I mean, that as you know, with Horse Boy, that's the standard thing, is follow the child. So without that, one can't build the trust. And if you can't build the trust, then there's no relationship. And if there's no relationship, there's no communication, and we can't begin. But sometimes, you know, one can have trouble perhaps explaining that to a parent or a caregiver, because like, no, we came here to do the thing, thing, and like, well, the person's not yet ready for the thing. We ready them for the thing.
Yeah. And I try and get that across to them when I meet with them first, that things are a little different around here sometimes, and sometimes I'll look a little nuts, but you know, we'll get there. It just looks a little different.
Just, you know, I want to go to a couple of the other modalities that you use, but with the DDP, what drew you to that particular model so strongly?
I think when the attachment specialist moved out the area, and I was like, well, crap, now I've got to figure this one out. I did a lot of research, and Dr. Hughes' work is just it's profound and it's so different. You know, it's being.
Who was Dr. Hughes? Tell us about Dr. Hughes.
Dan Hughes, he called me the horse lady. He's an amazing psychologist that he's written many, many books, and
What's his first name again? We didn't quite get it.
Dan
Hughes. All right.
Yeah. And he's just brilliant. He's like, you know, just sees the world a different way and wants everybody to know, like, to share what that way is. Kind of like with you and with Lynn, and it just learning. I don't know. The thing I like about it, I mean, in traditional therapy, you're taught to be the neutral party, and you have to have no feeling, and you have to be like this sort of stoic, blank thing. And with DDP, Dr. Hughes is about, you know, sometimes it is about helping this kid know that this is a sad moment, and boy, I'm getting a bit teary, and I've got a tear in my eye, and my heart's beating a bit fast. I think it's really sad, you know, because they don't know what sad is, you know, and it's beautiful. It's a beautiful model, and he just wants to share it with everyone, and he's done an amazing job. Yes, is it complicated? Did my brain explode in the training process? Probably about 10 times.
What was the thing that blew your brain the most?
It just works. I think the kind of like with Horse Boy, there's a scientific aspect behind it. There's a neurobiology behind the DDP. You've got, it's
What is that? Talk us through the science. I'm intrigued.
Well, I think I think that's where I'm still learning in the fact of just how it regulates your system. How can you, and that's why I use the neuro, which I'm sure we'll talk about at some point, because clients that have attachment issues are dysregulated and they don't know how to regulate. And then obviously your central nervous system is not in balance. So there's this scientific aspect to it, and it makes sense. And when it works, and when you avoid the power struggle and you learn how to have, a client accepts you and trusts you to try new things, it's just beautiful. So
For those people that are followers of, I mean, we're all followers of, to some degree, polyvagal theory, to something, is it something similar to that? Is it regulation of the autonomic nervous system, getting you from your dorsal freak out to your ventral vagal? Is it trust and rest and digest? Is it along those lines?
yes. Yeah. There's a lot of discussion about polyvagal theory, and John Balin is a wonderful neurobiologist, is also involved in all of that. And, it's just, I mean, it could be talk about it for
John
weeks.
Balin, you said?
Balin, Jon. Yeah.
And is he and Dan Hughes, they work together? And where are they based from? How do we find out?
Both are in the Northeast. I think John's in Delaware, and Dan's now up in Maine. He was in Pennsylvania, but he retired. Well, he's not really retired, but moved up to Maine. And they're a dream team when they work together. Actually, we have a conference in September for DDP. They're having a conference in the UK, and all about working with and seeing life through an intersectional lens.
What does that mean?
Just how everything comes together, whether it's drawn a blank of just, if you think of an intersection, whether it's diversity or racial or cultural or everything. Absolutely.
All the contexts
everything.
that add to a particular situation.
Yeah. And just seeing life through that lens and going to a deeper level. And this is sort of the focus of the conference that we're having in September. And we're going to have some amazing, John and Dan will be one of the presenters, and we've got presenters from all over the world to really focus on this.
And that's in September in the UK.
Yeah.
Cool.
In Nottingham.
Yeah. In Nottingham. One of my favorite places. You're going to be there?
Yes. Yeah, we are. It's going to be a good one.
When in September is it?
I think it's the 21st and 22nd. I think.
I might be in the UK then.
Fantastic.
All right. So DDP, a good thing. People should look into it. I'm going to look into it. Okay. Talk to us about, you've got, equine assisted psychotherapy. So this is something which I think a lot of people are curious about, but are shy to talk about because it sounds complicated. How does it what is it, and how does it differ from DDP? When would you use one and when would you use the other? Can you talk us through that a little bit, please?
So I do a lot of DDP in the office, and then I do a wonderful hybrid. I think where I struggle, where things are different, is in the Agala model. It's very self-directed, and it's about following the client's path and sort of guiding and not directing, sort of non-directive. And with DDP, a lot of the clientele that we have, it's very, that they don't understand human relationships in general, and they struggle with relationships, and they struggle. So being more directive is necessary. It's kind of like we were talking about the metaphor earlier. It's more difficult. They don't get it. So it's needed to maybe go into more detail. So this is where I've sort of provided this hybrid of utilizing my DDP skills and techniques within the equine therapy world, whether it's with a horse, whether it's with dogs and cats, whatever I might be using on the farm. if that makes sense.
It does. And now before we were pressing record, you talked me through a situation that's a bit specific to Pennsylvania, where the state has taken legal action over opioid.
Yes.
If you're listening to this from, say, the UK or other parts of Europe, you might not know or be aware of quite how drastically negatively the use of opioids of various kinds has impacted American life over the last 20, 25 years or so. Those of us who grew up, in the 80s, we were all familiar with crack and crystal meth and things that, like that, which impacted families terribly. But the opioid epidemic, because these drugs are quote unquote legal, sort of legal forms of heroin effectively, which by the way started as a legal drug. That's why it was called heroin. It was actually created by Bayer in Germany as supposedly a non-addictive form of laudanum. That didn't work out very well, and they called it heroin because it was supposed to save the day. But they're effectively forms of that. And when I was living in Texas for so long, I was observing neighbors, kids of neighbors, people around me just falling like flies.
Right.
And the latest one is fentanyl. And there are even people sort of within Horseboy who've lost relatives and that sort of thing in the last year or two to fentanyl, because fentanyl is so incredibly unregulated that you don't even know what's in the pill that you're taking, that a lot of people die. The pharmaceutical companies, Big Pharma, have unusually actually been taken to task over this a bit. Can you talk us through what's happened in Pennsylvania and how that's affected the services that you provide?
Yeah, it's really exciting in the fact that such horrible things have happened from the opioid epidemic. And it's my understanding now, if I'm incorrect, if I speak incorrectly, it's out of ignorance, but my understanding is that the states are able to, have sued Big Pharma, from my understanding, and then been able to have some settlement funding come in to help then support the communities work through the things that have happened because of the opioid epidemic. And in our area, and I had to write it down because otherwise I don't want to mess it up. It's called the York Opioid Collaborative. And everybody from outpatient clinicians like myself to the coroner, to different organizations in the area that deal with individual situations that are related to substance use, specifically the opioid epidemic. We are all getting together and we are going to work as a team, and we're going to try and right the wrong, so to speak. And we're working on, education. We're working on grief support. We're working on so many different things to help our community sort of rebuild from these horrendous things that have happened because of opioid.
What are the horrendous things that have happened? What have you observed in your rural community with this?
I can't tell you how many kids that I have that have been affected by whether it's the death of a parent, the overdose of a parent, drug addiction themselves. It's just rampant and just heartbreaking.
How many of the kids that you're seeing that have ended up in the foster system, is it related to this?
I would say more often than not, unfortunately.
Like above 50%?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Above 70?
I would probably say between 60 and 70% of our clients have a substance use issue, connection, passing, death, that sort of thing, related to substance use, drugs and alcohol.
Before I get into how you help them, I'm just curious, you're a long-time resident in the US. You're as American as British, really. What do you attribute it to? Because when I was first moving to the USA, drugs were really an urban problem.
Right.
And somewhere it shifted to becoming a rural problem.
Yeah.
You know, drugs were something which you did when I was young to try and be cool and identify with the counterculture and so on and so on. And then somewhere it moved into the mainstream.
Yeah.
And did this town to country shift. Why? What happened? What do you think caused that?
I think, well, interestingly enough, because I know when we moved here in the mid to late 80s, I remember my mum saying, "Oh, we're in a good area. There's no drugs. You know, it's all good." And my brother said, "I can get whatever you want tomorrow." So it was always there. I think, personally, I think with transportation, I mean, everyone's mobile now. It's everywhere. In our area, we're sort of, we've got New York, Philadelphia, Baltimore, DC. We're sort of like in the I-95 corridor, really from our area in South Central Pennsylvania. It's rampant because it can come in the ports. It can come in, so many different ways, and everyone's getting creative with it.
Right. But what's driving the demand? And what I mean by that is, when I was first, I trained horse under the table illegally in Virginia when I first moved to the USA. So, there's a lot of drinking. There was a certain amount of drug use. People use coke, get themselves up in the morning, that sort of thing. And then, that coke and that sort of thing were fairly rampant among the moneyed, horse owning youth and that sort of thing. But it was still, in general, things that people did to party, really to sort of, I guess, to celebrate life in a way. Some people crashed on it, but others, they did it for a while and then they moved on. And there was sort of an expectation that was what people would do. They'd go through their, naughty phase, and then, this isn't a naughty phase. And
Yeah.
what changed in American culture? What changed in rural culture?
I think,
Because you say you're on the I-95 corridor, right? But we know that you could go to the most remote part of Montana and it would be there. And even where quality of life is high, even where rural culture is strong and there's a lot of cowboy culture and rodeo and there's stuff going on, and it's not totally bored. I mean, that's definitely what's changed. That's what I'm trying to get to the bottom of. Something changed in the psyche.
I think as a culture, I think we were becoming to the whole like instant gratification, no pain, you don't have to deal with it. It's kind of like it's like the opioids. Well, you have surgery, we're given opioids because then it won't hurt, right? And I think from a mental health perspective, I think people obviously are now learning that the mental health part of life is very important. And it's been sort of poo-pooed. Can't see it. Not like a broken arm. You can't see it. So people don't understand it as much. And the same, my opinion, however it might come across, is that, if you use, you don't have to feel. If you use, you don't have to cope. And all those things those struggles and things that are difficult go away.
Right. And I guess I'm sort of thinking as you're talking, I guess that back 30, 40 years ago, these drugs were illegal, difficult to get. It was quite risky to go and get them. That was half the thrill, was, we've got to go to this bad area. There's a dodgy bloke that you've got to buy it from and blah. But of course, these drugs are illegal. They're prescribed by doctors and given in great quantity. And then they sit around in people's houses and kids find them.
Yeah.
Maybe that's the difference, perhaps.
Yeah.
What have you observed is the difference with fentanyl as opposed to the other? Because fentanyl seems to be the latest model that seems to be the Ferrari of death dealing legal opioids. What's different about that?
I think it's the deadliest. I mean,
Why is it so deadly?
So strong. It's unregulated. You can't. I mean, yeah. You never know what, I hear so often it was, they OD'd because it was laced with fentanyl.
Yeah.
Because they can't regulate it. I mean, I'm not sure. I mean, it's an illegal drug, so it's not like it's going to be regulated, but, yeah.
Okay, so somebody comes to you and their life has been negatively impacted by it. What percentage of people are you seeing that are addicts/users? What percentage of people are you seeing that are people who've been affected by family members who are addicts/users?
That's, as an outpatient clinician, it's, typically, I think many outpatient standpoint, active using it's not exactly, our top choice. I did work with one client in particular who was struggling with recovery. That's, we sort of continue to go back and forth. Most of the time they're working on their recovery. They've gone through rehab. And a lot of times I'm working with the kids, and the kids watching the family members go through rehab, being away, disconnecting, maybe then, starting to use again, that sort of thing. So that's where a lot of my work is with the kiddos.
Right. And so when a kid is observing this, obviously they're at risk of being drawn in.
Yeah.
But there's also, just 1,000 other traumas that can. What's your standard approach with a kid that is affected by this going on in the household? What do you?
I think for me, from a therapeutic standpoint, it's understanding what they're going through, how it's affecting them, how I can help support them and process through these experiences, how to keep them safe. Those sort of things is very important.
You have kids that say to you sometimes, well, you wouldn't understand it. You come from a nice home. You grew up with horses. You're posh. You're this, you're that. How can you possibly empathize or put yourself in our shoes like this? Do you get that?
Sometimes, yeah. And then sometimes it does feel better when you feel like you talk to somebody that you can connect with. And, a lot of times that's when you're in the drug and alcohol field, you have people in recovery that are counselors. And, sometimes that might be a conversation to be had of, that would be really cool. Maybe we can connect. Maybe we can find somebody for you to connect with that has those, experiences in a therapeutic setting. Let's talk about that. Let's unpack that a little bit, because it might just feel I need to feel like I can connect with somebody, but then is my education and understanding enough? Or are they just deflecting away and just saying, well, you're crap. I don't want to talk to you because I don't want to talk about it anyway.
Right. And I would find whatever excuse to not talk.
Right. Yeah.
How do the horses help with this?
They're brilliant. They're just brilliant. They feed into the energy. I have these big blocks. I have these old blocks that have words written all over them. And I cannot tell you how often the kids will pull these blocks out and just throw them all over the arena. And the horses will go over and pick them up. 9 times out of 10. And I'm pretty sure horses can't read, but they'll pick up a block that will be like heartbroken or scared, and all the blocks are not necessary. Whatever they pick up, the client can relate whatever's happening with. And
do you have a block that says totally cool, no problem?
Yeah, I need to have one of those actually. Yeah, but we do. We have loved. We have all these different ones, and more times than not, the horses they'll connect. Whether it's if they need the energy and the being beside them and interacting with them in the moment, or if they need to they turn their butts around, facing away, those sort of things. And as a clinician, then that's what we talk about. Wow, that's really interesting. That one's over there looking that way. What's going on with that? That's my mom. She's always looking out. She's checking to see where the dealer is and when the next fix is coming. And, I'm just back here. They don't give a shit, that sort of thing. And yeah, it's just, the horses feel it. They feel the energy.
When you get these kids, how long are you typically working with them for? And do you get a chance to follow through with their progress afterwards, or is it a bit of a mystery where they go?
It's an interesting question, actually, because the process with developmental trauma is sort of, it's not a quick one. And I have found in child welfare in our area more recently, they've been trying to sort of push things through a bit quicker, whether it's terminating parental rights, placing for adoption, that sort of thing. But it's interesting that if you don't have the child or the client regulated and secure, they're not able to then move forward in life in a healthy way. And then you have failed adoptions and you have ongoing mental health issues. And I'm seeing more of it because they're pushing things along, and I'm saying they're not ready, but then I'm getting trapped because for reasons of, the child welfare system says, well, they need to be adopted now. And sometimes they need to be adopted, but my services need to continue. Right. But in our area and most areas, the cases close the day of adoption. So then services don't continue unless they pay out of pocket. So we are creative. There are times where I have the children and youth have agreed to pay for up to a year of continued services or ongoing. So we're getting there. But it's, I've had clients that have been with me for 6 months to a year. I've got clients that have been with me for 9 years.
Okay. Talk to us about a 9-year client, because that's quite an amazing thing to be able to go through the kind of trajectory of relationship with somebody. Can you, without naming name, can you talk us through a story?
So I've got a couple. I'll go. So this one's a cool one because this is a kiddo, when you work with clients that have extreme trauma, extreme trauma, life was very unsafe. And I'm going to talk in very big generalities because I know this is going worldwide, and I don't want to even come close to potentially breaching confidentiality. So working with a client and a caregiver within clients to this left, the client that I've had for a long time has all the programs. So they've had neurofeedback, they've had they've had equine therapy, you name it, that we've done it, they've done it, and just learning that life isn't scary and life is not chaotic. And, from a lot of times I have clients that there's a lot of pooping issues, urinating issues, whether it's in the rooms, whether it's in the house, a lot of sabotage. Again, power struggles, need for control. They have nothing else that they can control. They will control their bowel movements and extreme behavior issues, runaway behaviors. Going, all of these things and just never giving up. And I think that's the biggest thing when you have a client for so long. You're building a relationship, right? This is a client that doesn't know how to build relationships. They didn't have that secure attachment. So not giving up, they run away. Well, let's figure out how to keep you safe. What's going on? Finding the right medication, that sort of thing. So now being able to reflect to a level of, sometimes I just don't get people. And sometimes I talk to them and there's a sort of this void of, because I wasn't taught that when I was little. When I was young, I didn't know what that was. And I wasn't, I didn't know what having a cuddle and feeling safe and secure was. And being able to go from that to then now being able to reflect to a deeper level. And I only see them once a month, and it just, what a journey for them to now be able to go out into the world. And it's just beautiful.
Right. We judge or we discern, if you like, success so often by, as you said, going out into the world, having a job, having a home. not causing trouble, not causing yourself or others undue suffering, but even more becoming a contributing member of society. Have you seen that outcome?
Yeah. Yeah. And even times where I've maybe worked with them for a short time. And like I said, the models that I've chosen to use in the collaboration and combination, like I've seen kids that might have run away, but I've worked with them for 6 months to a year, and then been able to, just through the grapevine, I'll run into a worker and be like, oh, did they ever like reconnect? Did they ever, are they safe? And to know that they're doing okay and they're doing well. And yes, they did have some struggle, but they're safe now. Means the world, And I had a kid that I went to shelter to see, and I was like, wait, this kid looks familiar. He was a part of a group that we had years ago. And this kid remembered the names of our animals, the dogs, the horses, and the cats. And you can't tell me in typical therapy, in traditional therapy, half the time the kids don't even know the name of their therapist.
Oh.
Right? That's pretty powerful. That's pretty cool.
Have you seen any of those people come into the therapy world themselves and become therapist mentors?
Not yet, just because we're in 18 years. I have had some interns that have grown up in the foster care system that have become therapists, but I did not work with them.
But you've seen it happen.
Yeah, for sure.
That's great. So
Yeah.
so some can see it as a career path too.
Yes.
All right, I want to ask you about another thing. You mentioned neurofeedback. Now, I happen to be a fan of neurofeedback. I've had neurofeedback myself, and in times in my life when I've been going through funks, I will seek out healing of various kinds. People know that I would obviously ride to Mongolia or go to the Kalahari or, go sit in sweat lodges and all of that. Yeah. But I also look, in more conventional, as much as say neurofeedback is conventional. I love to try therapy. I find therapy didn't work for me so much because it felt like my nose was being rubbed in my own poo, and it's a bit like a bad dog, bad dogs. But I found with neurofeedback, I'd been intrigued because I'd met a neurofeedback practitioner and therapist some years before, and I'd always thought, ooh, that sounds interesting. Got to learn more about that, and been on the list. And then finally, there was sort of one day I might, benefit from that. So I went along and had the electrodes put on my head and watched the screen. I'm going to have you talk us through what happens with that. But what was interesting to me is I could physically feel my brain changing.
Yeah.
And I could feel thought processes changing in a way that the closest I could come to something, compare that palpably was things I felt with really good healers in indigenous settings where you can feel the change really happening physiologically inside you in your brain. So please talk us through neurofeedback. A lot of people won't know what it is, and they might get that confused with other types of feedback things. Yeah. So what is neurofeedback? How does it differ from other types of feedback? And then also there are different types of neurofeedback. So just give us the skinny.
So I use a system called neuroptimal neurofeedback, and that is a system that is sort of included within itself. So sometimes with biofeedback or other neurofeedback systems, you have to become a clinician in that you make adjustments as the training goes. With the system that I use, the neuroptimal system, it is all within the algorithm. So as having the machine, the brain training system, I'm able to hook up a client. It's a 33-minute system training, and I unhook them. Everything is done within the algorithm, which is fantastic because there's no room for human error.
Does that mean if I go, Alexa is healing me? All right, Alexa, fix my brain.
Yes, there you go. Brain, okay, yeah. I love this system, and again, it's the system that I chose to use because of it being within or within the system, and I don't have to, because I can do a therapy session while that client is hooked up for neurofeedback. So the system that I use reads 356 brainwaves a second. It allows for, if it reads an imbalance in the brain, there will be a scratch in the music or a break in the music. And the brain kind of goes, wait, what? And adjusts. So it's helping sort of like regulate your brain mechanically. So then hopefully your brain will then start regulating itself on its own.
Are they watching? So when I did it, I watched a movie and then I actually watched a series on neuroscience. I thought that was appropriate. And I was sitting in the chair, and whenever occasionally, the screen would go very small or go fuzzy or something. And presumably that was when the machine was detecting some, quirk or anomaly or something. And then it would right itself. And as you explained that, my therapist explained, well, that's your brain writing it. But this can come as gobbledygook to people that don't understand. What's going on? Why are you watching a screen? Why are you listening to music? Why does it change or the screen goes small or something? What's happening when that happens, and what happens when it writes itself? To just give us a total ignoramus to tell us.
Well, I think when the brain is stressed, if you think about a muscle, like your brain's a muscle, just like your arms and your legs and all that stuff. But when you're out of whack, your brain, nothing is balanced, right? So it's like when we're stressed, we hold ourselves, we're tense, we're like achy, our brain's achy, we have headaches, we're not sleeping, those sort of things. And being able to, like you say, you feel a difference. So it's reading your brain waves and it's working to regulate, it's working to balance within the system. So I always called it my magic machine. I love the kids. They like me calling it a magic machine because it does. They feel better using it. And the great thing is the system now, and you can actually do a therapy session during the time that you're hooked up. That's why I like doing, I can do a movie. I choose the audio with the music because I can do the therapy session at the same time.
When you do a therapy session at the same time, though, presumably the person, they're talking to you, right? Presumably the person is going through, the brain is computing information that, and trying to make decisions, trying to understand things. How do you know that the machine is not misinterpreting the brain going, what does Ellie mean by that, as a brain imbalance thing? Like, how would it know?
Because it's amazing. But it is all within the algorithm, to be fair. I'd have to ask Dr. Brown for that one. But
Who is Dr. Brown, by the way?
Created the neurooptimal system.
Dr. Who Brown?
Just go with Dr. Brown because it's something that's a bit...
Neurooptimal...
Neurofeedback, yeah.
Neurofeedback, Dr. Brown. What? Just keep talking. I'm going to look at...
So for me, I find it interesting because I'll start with a client who might be actually quite resistant to opening up to that deeper level. And more often than not, the brain regulates probably about 15 minutes in, and it's starting to open up, and they're actually more open to going to a deeper level. So it's almost an aid to the therapy session because you're able to really go to a great place. There's less deflection and disconnect from a therapeutic perspective, which is amazing. That's why when I have clients that are in shelter and I go see them in shelter, I always recommend the neurofeedback along with the therapy session because it's important. I mean, being in a shelter placement anyway is nerve-wracking and stressful. So it's just important. We have the ability through the neurooptimal system to help regulate and balance. And yeah, it's amazing.
What makes you decide, okay, I think for this client, it's neurofeedback?
I think if I see them dysregulated and not being able to regulate, as long as I can keep them in the chair, like I have some kids, like I said earlier, that just need to run around. That it's a very active session. Obviously, they can't do that if they're attached to neurofeedback. But I think if I can see them starting to regulate themselves without it, they won't need it, But if they really need, if they're that dysregulated and they're really struggling, it's such a, I mean, it's just a wonderful, I don't know what the right word is, tool. It's just a wonderful tool that it'll help them get to where they need to be. Easier, quicker.
Do you find that in general, clients, kids or adults, that they're quite curious about it? Like,
Absolutely.
it's a gadget, right? Yeah.
Yeah, I do some sports kids that have like big either riding, showing, athletics. I have some clients that come just for neurofeedback because it helps with their sport performance. A lot of sports, especially, I mean, I think worldwide, but there's a lot of pressure in sports for teenagers. And I cannot tell you, like, I'll show up and nobody wants to see me. They're just like, you have the machine, do you have the machine? Because they want to feel better, and they do. Like you said, it works.
Yeah, no, it really did. It was. I looked forward. I couldn't imagine looking forward to a therapy session until I discovered that. I was like, I'd be like leaping out of the car and into the chair.
Yeah.
And it also felt frequently that one got full of endorphins because you feel your brain actually working hard. You know how it is. You yawn. You sometimes have trouble staying awake. You almost want to drop off, and you can feel your brain kind of fucking on, running uphill here, but there was a corresponding feeling of pleasure and relief.
Right.
It's as if one had done a workout. Have you tried it yourself?
Oh, I love it. Yes. If I have a big court day, like testimony wise, I'll hook up before I go in because I'll be super focused. But also, running a business and everything, you get overwhelmed and get a bit hectic. But it's a nice way to regulate as well. But yeah, love it.
So when you do that, I mean, for your own stress management then and coping, do you have someone hook you up or do you hook yourself up?
I hook myself up, which is quite tricky.
Yeah, sure.
Trying to figure it out. Yeah. But,
Okay, I can see why you had trouble remembering Dr. Brown's Christian name, because it is indeed one I have never seen before. His name is Valdine.
There you go, Val. That's
Brown.
it. I knew it was something difficult.
Valdine, it's Valdeane.
Okay.
Reed Brown, PhD. And I'm looking at his bio, which is like 8,000 pages long. But it says he was working in the mental health industry before getting his PhD in psychology. But for over 25 years, he taught continuing medical education courses, a lot of working with borderline anger and so on, and developed it with his wife, Dr. Sue Brown. And I've pulled up a website, but we'll give all these resources at the end.
Yeah.
Do you know of many other equine therapy places using neurofeedback?
I don't actually, and it's a conversation that comes up a lot. Well, first of all, with equine, it's difficult because you'd have to do it separately.
Sure.
But I often have, through the different conversations and connections with professionals through DDP, with dyadic developmental psychotherapy, it's a conversation that's often had. There's a lot of interest because it's such a great additional support. So it's something that's being talked about more. And Dr. Brown, his brain, remember I said earlier, like, if I don't know it, I want to find somebody that does. Like you said, it's like 8,000 pages long. He thinks around like 5 corners from now. Like, he is so beyond smart. And it was an honor to meet him.
How did you meet him? Where did you meet him?
He was a part of the advanced training session that we did. And just fascinating, absolutely amazing man. And just, again, he's created this system that's just absolutely brilliant.
So if somebody with Horseboy, for example, we have a lot of locations, and I'm thinking now as we're talking, maybe we should have, a neurofeedback wing to what we do, because as we're always saying, so much of the time the person isn't actually on the horse or interacting with the horse at all. There's all this other time when they're at your place where they're not doing that. What are we doing with the rest of our time? So we, of course, have movement method and other things, but I'm beginning to think, okay, yeah, maybe we should have a neurofeedback studio. What training do you have to go through to do it? How much does it cost? What do people need to know?
It's actually the cost itself. I was just having a conversation with a colleague last night, actually. We have a professional system. They have family systems that are less expensive. And there's a level, I think it's a level 1 training and advanced training. It just goes into more detail about the actual system and the outcomes and that sort of thing in the advanced training. Probably about, we got our system a few years back, but probably about 15,000 maybe
The system
for the professional system.
for the training.
It wasn't a lot. I mean, it was probably a few $100
Okay.
training, and it was online. You don't have to be a clinician to just hook up. You can be a life coach. You could be a worker, because as long as you're not providing counseling, you can see what I mean.
Okay.
So it can be used in different avenues.
And someone could indeed just get a machine and use it on themselves.
Sure. Yeah. So I went down to pony finals in the US, and I was hooking people up. And I had one of the customers went and bought their own machine because they're like, the kid was absolutely loved it and wanted to keep doing it. So now, if you have a personal machine, you pay per time that you get hooked up. You can get a bundle of 100 or 10. With the professional system, it's unlimited, which is nice.
And okay, so how long is the training?
I think it's like a weekend or 2 mornings.
So it's really doable.
Yeah, absolutely.
And insurance, any special insurances? What if the machine goes bang while it's on your head or whatever?
Yeah. Well, there's no, it can't hurt you. So insurance, like liability, I mean, that is covered under our liability, for the company.
So if someone's already got a therapeutic practice, they don't need to take out extra insurance for this.
Correct. We do pay for a membership with the company. So then, we had a situation where it stopped working because, technology stopped working. They had another system to us within 2 days from Canada. It's a Canadian company. And within 2 days, we shipped them ours. They fixed it. They shipped it back. I mean, absolutely brilliant. They also will go in the back door and fix it if it's something that they can fix in from remotely. That is, I mean, it's worth every penny.
Okay.
So.
Sold. I think I'm going to do it. Why not? Okay, so we've covered a fair bit of ground here. I know you're also working with military.
Yeah.
How does that work, and how's it different from the work you're doing with trauma, with other types of trauma, or does it really effectively, turn out to be the same work?
Well, I think the work of it is the same. I think the biggest struggle we have is the stigma behind mental health treatment with getting veterans and military to sort of buy in to the work that we do, which is probably the biggest struggle. My biggest, just my awareness, because I have some vets that have been sort of been with me for a long time. But I think the biggest thing is that if you're close to a base or a big VA hospital, that's where you're going to get the clientele. So just from a personal sort of feedback standpoint, it's really difficult to get them to come to therapy. Even
How
when
do you do it?
we still struggle. We still struggle. Even if we talk about, just doing groups and not even therapy, we're doing just learning. It's still really hard. If you see what I mean.
Do you go and knock on the doors of the base and say, "Hey, we're here," or how do they find you?
So we don't have anything close. We're still our VA hospital's an hour and a half away, which makes it really difficult. But yes, that's how I started. So yeah, it's about knocking on the doors, asking them 3 times, and hopefully by the 4th time they'll just say yes.
Yeah. I mean, as we've fallen into it ourselves almost by accident, by word of mouth, and now we have programs with the U.S. Air Force and the Bundeswehr in Germany. Recently, actually, with the Department of Defense in the Netherlands. in Europe, it seems that there really is an embracing and an acceptance, particularly when it involves horses and animal. I think you must have found this, that when you have adults and you're pairing them up with the ponies,
Yeah.
well, they show up just because they like the horses, and that one of the things that we noticed was that people will complete and finish a therapy program really just because they miss the horses and they want to come. They don't give it. And that's really how it should be. And I think that's one of the powers. Is there anything specific about the work that you're doing with military or first responders? What's different about your approach when you're doing that?
I think it's all quite consistent. I think the biggest piece for me, I mean, we work within the trauma field, and I mean, our lives are built on relationships. So whether it's combat trauma or complex trauma, we're still going to use the same skills, and it just might have a little bit of a different audience.
Right. If you have, do you deal with guilt of feeling that somebody was there on the wrong side doing the wrong thing? Like that kind of guilt, not I took a life or I experienced a traumatic situation or many, but I really actually feel that I shouldn't have been there, and I was the baddie. Have you dealt with that guilt?
Yeah, for sure.
And how do you deal with that? I'm curious.
I think with a lot of acceptance and empathy, you have to fully understand and unpack where they're coming from, and understanding, that perspective, putting yourself in their shoes and understanding what is that for them. That's so important, and for them to be heard and to completely unpack it and understand it, and they can't change it, but how can they work through it?
How do they work through it? Do you tend to observe? What's the internal process that you observe?
Well, it's different for everyone.
Sure.
I think they have to go through, the acceptance. They have to go through, understanding. And I think the horses meeting them where they are and being able to just, they don't take any crap. The horses don't. They know, I've had vets talking about situations in the middle of the field and the alpha horse comes and puts his head on his chest, from the other side of the field. It's instances like that that's different, that makes it more profound and more powerful to, talking about the loss of a family member and then having this profound moment, and that's what makes this work different.
Absolutely. No, I couldn't agree more. And when you see those things happen, you can't explain them. I remember, you probably remember a horse we had called Clue, who actually passed away this year, finally.
Yeah.
But in the best way. He very, very old, and he just was not getting up one morning in the field he was still the boss, Mr. Grumps. But Mr. Grumps, I remember once we had a child who had drowned and was in a pretty unreachable vegetative state. And, they brought him out to us and he said, gosh, I'm punching above my weight here. I truly just don't know what to do. I don't want to turn people away. And Clue, it exactly as you described, he came from across the field and he began to lick this child all over his body.
Wow.
And you're looking at it going, what is this?
Yes.
You think you know something about horses, and
Yeah.
you know nothing at all. Yeah. And at the end of that, the child reached out,
Yeah.
and and Clue's like, "Oh, job done." Someone just starts saying, "You're standing with your mind completely blown."
Yeah. It
Yeah.
is. But I think it helps the process, doesn't it? I mean, that profound story, and it just, it can bring, especially I think with veterans, sometimes the disconnect can be so severe, and it can bring like that grounding, that connection back to the moment and to the present time. That can be really important with the horses. Like I've had a lot of female veterans with military sexual trauma. And I'll tell you, I've had horses that don't get mouthy. And then it's that whole boundary, and you need to say no and set the rule. And then, wow, what was that? I didn't want him doing that, Okay. How did you say no, thank you? No, I don't want you to do that. So it's a great start to that conversation of like, no.
So that's interesting. You observe the horse pushing over
Yeah.
the boundary, or at least perhaps the boundary not being there. So the horse, and then the boundary being set, and then the horse respect.
Yeah. Well, the horse not respecting it immediately, because sometimes people don't listen to that first no.
Yeah.
And having to, yeah. That happens a lot with the sexual trauma stuff. From a standpoint of, as a victim.
Here's a question. Men tend not to talk about their sexual trauma very much. There's more, particularly if it's male to male, there's a lot of shame attached to it, and, compromised manhood and all that. But it does happen. Of course, it happens quite a lot in the military. Have you worked with that?
Not as much, again, just military-wise, just because of just our location. We don't have that large of a population.
Wow.
I have worked with it with younger boys that have been victims of sexual assault, sexual abuse in childhood, and then working through not only the trauma, but their sexuality, their identity, that sort of thing. Yeah.
When it comes to an identity issue that's tied up with that, how can you give us an idea about how the work with the horses might play out?
Well, it's interesting actually, because as of right now, the conversation comes up a lot. The conversation comes up a lot because we have all male horses on the farm, and that's not by choice. It just happened that way, whether they were donated, whether they're ours. And I swear, most oftentimes, the male horses will drop down with their penis out so they can, during session, because either they have to pee, they're relaxed, and it seems to present itself when you're talking about sexual assault, that sort of thing. So it gives a good conversation starter, because you're already talking about anatomy, and because especially younger kids, they'll be like, what's that? Because they don't necessarily understand, but everybody's different. And when you talk about, it's great to start with the horses, which talk about their identity, and their identities change from client to client. They might be a girl, they might be a boy, they might be a cat. I mean, it can be whatever needs to be. So it's a good place to start, and it's a safer place to start. It's safer to talk about them than it is to talk about yourself.
Right, and I guess too, when you say that you're dealing with male horses, of course you're dealing with geldings, not with stallions, big stallion behaviors. And so I guess that's an interesting. Do you use that analogy? Well, this is. You couldn't say that the horse is gender neutral because they're still male, but their gender has been modified.
Yeah,
That is impacting their behavior. Does that come up in conversation? And if so, how?
Not specifically, because I try and leave the educational part, that sort of educational part out, because I want to know more from what the client's observing and what they related to. So, for example, having a conversation with a client about what brought them into foster care and the sexual assault by mom's caramel, that sort of thing. And then the horse is around and they drop down, so we're having conversations, we're starting conversations. And we have one little miniature horse that came into our care because of some serious abuse. It was not sexual abuse, but it's a good place to start. It's a little bit safer. We talk about how he is and what his life is like now and how he might see things. And he also says he has tricks. So he says yes and no, which is nice. So depending on the age of the child, that might come into play. So yeah.
The work that you do when you go out, okay, you talk us, how big of a team are you now? You've got a relatively compact herd. You said 2 horses, a couple of minis, and a cat and a dog sort of thing. Look, it sounds like you've got a lot of clients. And so who are your co-workers? How have you built your practice? What does your practice look like? And what kind of line is the optimal sort of a practice?
Yeah, we only have a small farm, so we only have about 10 acres at the main farm. So that would be, really can't get much more. We're getting a thoroughbred actually next week, which is nice. He's going to be off the track and he'll have a new career, which will be very similar. We're going to try and kind of almost document his journey, which will be nice. We have 2 therapists on staff now, which is fantastic because we had multiple therapists and then COVID hit and then I was the only therapist again. We have about 5 equine professionals, 6 if I count the one in Maryland, which is nice. So it's probably about a staff of 10 altogether. So we're still quite small. But it's a tricky world to be in. I mean, we're probably one of the only facilities in the area that strictly it was mostly equine work. I mean, I said I do office work as well, but primarily, I mean, our equine is in our name. So yeah.
And when you're doing office work, are you often bringing those people into the equine work at some point?
It depends. Like I'll have some office sessions and we have some cats and dogs. We've had rabbits in the past. So, we still have animals in session that just might be a little different. And then I have a kid that has been doing neurofeedback in an office session. And she's like, can we do horses? I'd like to do some horse stuff. And I'm like, okay.
Yeah.
So
how does the cat help?
I love the cat. So our cat, his name is Mars, and he has his own. He grew up in a very violent, not violent as in he was hurt, but it was sort of lots of play fighting and aggression. And so it's great in a way because a lot of the kids that we have also grew up in that environment. And then when they interact, they have to learn how to respect and relax and not hurt each other. So it's a win-win when Morris doesn't bring out his claws,
So yeah, so how does Mode help with that?
He does. So it's nice because it's an education of it not only does it happen with people, it can happen with animals, but there can be some aggressive behaviors.
So Mars would like hiss and thrash and say, oi.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. He likes his head scratched, but if you touch his back, which I'm sure has been an area of unsafe for him, he'll say no thank you. And now he's originally he would literally latch onto you and bite you. We would try really hard to not have him sort of interact with the clients because it wasn't safe. But over time, he's becoming really mellow and lovely and nibbles a little bit, but not like we used to. And it's a great story for kids to see. Even the cat can learn how to do something different.
Right. Yeah. So I guess it makes an analogy.
Yeah.
And the dogs, how do you use them?
So we have a corgi. Her name is Tinka, and she's the friendliest dog ever. And she interacts. She does some really nice, she'll push the burr towards the client. She loves to play. Really, she's very interactive. So again, just like we would have with the horses in session, very interactive. And she generally just loves people. So there's this happiness and this joy that she can bring to session, which is good as well.
Yeah, joy, I think, is the key here. I think if any of us were to really try to define what it is we try to do, it's that we try to bring joy, right? I mean, that we, there is suffering, and what is the opposite of suffering? The opposite of suffering is joy.
Yeah.
And yeah, I've observed, I think more times than I can count, a dog often being really key with that.
Yeah.
They can access that so immediately, despite whatever other emotional stuff going on. They're like, I am going to be joyful right now because there's a ball in front of me. And it's just sort of as an analogy that, that is possible. You can have stuff going on in your life, but hey, if someone traps a ball, it's fun. I think that's often an underutilized tool.
Yeah.
The absolute commitment to joyful mood that dogs can have and can bring.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I think there's going to be people that might want to get in touch with you because you mentor people in how to get going with this type of thing. How do people reach you, Ellie?
So our website is www.equiteam.org, which is Equiteam.
Equiteam.org.
ORG. Yep. And that basically give you all the connections of what it'll give my number and email. The website is the way to go.
Okay. And then just again, talk us through one by one each of these modalities you're using, just so people can write them down now at the end.
So we use the EGALA model, which is the Equine Assisted Growth and Learning Association equine therapy model. I'm a practitioner with dyadic developmental psychotherapy.
DDP.
And
DDP.
DDP, yeah. I am a practitioner for horse boy. And I do neurooptimal neurofeedback training.
Neurooptimal neurofeedback. And people can, chaps, if you're looking on Ellie's website, the equiteam.org, there's a lot of information on it. And please do reach out to her as a mentor. I've watched over the years Ellie build, and she was you awesome. I remember when we first met you, but I've just seen you build it and build it and build it and go from strength to strength. Yeah. Survive COVID and keep serving.
Right. Yeah.
So hats off.
Thank you.
An easy ride, I know.
Oh. Bonjour.
If you had any last words advice for someone just starting out in this field, because I think this is what people like me, I don't feel like a veteran in the field. I feel like the same, but I always was. But people who've been at it for a while now, what's your advice? What would you say people now get into this professionally?
I think to simplify it is just don't give up, find your passion and connect with people that can, if you don't know it, connect with somebody that does.
Look for mentorship.
Really important.
Yeah. All right. Well, listen, Ellie, it's been a delight. Thank you so much for coming and talking to us.
I know. Been wonderful. Thank you so much.
Remind us again, there's this DDP conference in Nottingham in the UK,
yes.
Right?
And I think it's the 22nd and 23rd of September.
Okay. So DDP conference, people can type that in.
It's the 23rd and 24th. It's the Monday and Tuesday. Yeah.
Then where in Nottingham is it? Is it a college or something? Or...
The conference centre. East Midlands Conference Centre, I think.
All right. Well, we've got a horseboy place not far from there, so let's see if I can.
Yeah, brilliant. It's going to be absolutely amazing. I'm excited. There's been a lot of thought and effort going into it, and the breakdown of all the presentations that will be coming out shortly. So
there's a lot of people in the UK doing DDP?
Yes, huge contingent in the UK.
Gonna look into this more. Thanks for learning me on to. I had no idea. That's why I do this, so I can learn.
Brilliant. Thank you so much.
My pleasure.
Fantastic to catch up with you.
Likewise. All right. Well, I hope it won't be too long before I see you.
Thank you for joining us. We hope you enjoyed today's podcast. Join our website, newtrailslearning.com, to check out our online courses and live workshops in Horseboy Method, Movement Method, and Athena. These evidence-based programs have helped children, veterans, and people dealing with trauma around the world. We also offer a horse training program and self-care program for riders on longridehome.com. These include easy-to-do online courses and tutorials that bring you and your horse joy. For an overview of all shows and programs, go to rupertisaacson.com. See you on the next show. And please remember to press subscribe and share.